កម្មវិធីកិច្ចសន្ទនាកម្ពុជានិងពិភពលោក
Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue or Southeast Asia TV. Tonight I have the pleasure to have two friends. One from Cambodia, and you all know David Van. He does appear quite regularly. But we have another friend from far away from Nepal. But we sort of like in the same thinking that Nepal, Cambodia, and several other countries who have emerged from a post-crisis or post-conflict country, we go through a certain development pattern. And tonight I would like to sort of like have a dialogue a bit, on how we can look at development from different prism, from different paradigm, from different angle. Do we have to always follow the pattern of, say, the Washington Consensus? I don't know, but I really look forward to have a good discussion, and hopefully we can learn something, Okay, so anyway, Sujeev, welcome to the show, and I'm going to ask you to maybe say a few minutes about your background to the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Siphana. Thank you for having me on this show. So I'm Sujeev Shakya. I lead a management consulting and a financial advisory firm based out of Nepal called Bead Management. And we work across quite a few countries. We are in Rwanda, we work in Bhutan, of course in Nepal, and it's been a couple of months we've started working in Cambodia, and there's some work in US and the Indian Himalayan region. So that's the sort of work we do, and I come with before starting this 8 years ago, I was with the largest corporate group in Nepal, spent about 20 years, left as a group president of that group. Also, there's tremendous interest in the sort of my writing work and analysis work. So I chair the Nepal Economic Forum. And of course, I have David here, who's my colleague at Bauer Group Asia, Washington, D.C. based advisory firm. So I lead the Nepal practice as a senior advisor. And also you were talking about Washington Consensus. We've started, along with a gentleman by the name of Lawrence Bram, we've started the Himalayan Consensus. Every year we're meeting in Nepal, and I work and act as the Secretary General to it. So multiple areas of interest, multiple diverse work, but looking at some patterns around the world as to how things are moving, and especially trying to connect the dots between various fragile states and states that are emerging out of conflict and potentially are the future of development and growth.
All right. David, a few word introduction.
Sure. So my name is David Van, and my daily bread earner is to basically involve in a lot of advocacy measures for private sector in both trade, economic, and social issues.
But mostly from a multinational perspective, right?
Yes.
Okay.
As Sujeev said, I also represent Bauer Group Asia in Cambodia, where we help U.S. Fortune 500 getting engaged with the government in terms of any particular problem they may have with any given public institution.
All right. Well, Sujeev, Cambodia and Nepal have one thing in common historically, is that we were the first two least developed country, LDC, who was admitted to the WTO through accession at the same time, just a couple of minutes difference, right? In Cancun. The only difference is that Nepal ratified the WTO accession right away, the protocol, and then Cambodia, it took us a year because at that time there was some delay in government formation. So by default, Cambodia was behind Nepal in WTO accession. But having said that, right, we joined WTO. We were admitted in 2003 together, so it's more than a decade now, and I would say that the development pattern of Cambodia and Nepal are probably quite similar. Perhaps you can say a bit about Nepal, and I can say a bit about Cambodia. And David, you be the judge.
I think when it comes to development patterns, and I think accession to WTO was for Nepal to open up, and like in many other countries. Initially there was euphoria. Like in 1990s, we opened up the economy. We had foreign investors coming in, international investors coming in. What we tend to see is that the local business groups, they tend to close in after a while. They say, okay, it's fine. This is great. International investors coming in, foreign investors coming in. It's amazing. But then they start to close in and get into a protectionist mode. And that is what I observe between Cambodia and Nepal. The difference I see is that in Cambodia, you're welcoming foreign investment, you're welcoming foreign investors, and that is pushing your economic growth. And whereas we have shied away from that, created different impediments, barriers. And of course, when you read the papers, it doesn't give you much confidence of investing in a country like Nepal. So I think while we got into WTO at a very similar times, Cambodia has been able to take advantage of it and integrate it with the global economy much more further than Nepal has.
Sujeev, this is something that not many people pay attention, because we look at the negotiating pattern, the development pattern, in the current present time, right? The case Cambodia, you have to look from the historical, perspective, the genocide, the communism, but more than anything, the 17 year of economic embargo. So that was imposed by the U.S., of course, and then by default, Cambodia could not trade, right? But what is an economic embargo? Is economic jail. So the difference is that after living 17 years in economic jail, who does not want to break out of jail? Right? So, and that's why when we negotiate WTO, we're very different than in Vietnam or in Laos. Because for us, nobody need to pry open our door. We want to get out of that jail, that economic jail, right? And that's probably explain why. And you see, the other dimension is that the killing field, right, of the late 70s, the socialism that followed a decade later, forced us to appreciate that nobody want to be poor, right? And this poverty is what drive us to want to open up, to welcome, foreign direct investment, to welcome the outside world, So this is pretty much the mindset.
I think before we move on to David, I think one thing I do see is mindset is very critical because if you look at Nepal, it's positioned being land linked with India and China, two of the growing economies for decades. Geographically we are in a very good position. But what happened from the mindset, we were very closed. We were close to the outside world till the 1950. We had a feudal monarchy, which went on till about 1990. There was multi-party democracy. But then we still didn't see this opening up. And of course, we went through 10 years of insurgency between 1996 to 2006. That did hold back a lot of growth and development. And it was, again, trying to look inward, trying to be, a protectionist state, and very much like the feudal past. So I think it's a lot to do. With mindset, you might be in the best of geographies, but you may not be able to take advantage of it. So the position where you are in terms of geography and a mindset, I think those two are very critical. Whereas Cambodia, I think, took that to an advantage and move ahead. I mean, as I say, I'm very new to this place, but I do see that sense of taking advantage of your location, of all the opportunities, be it WTO, be it ASEAN. That's the sort of sense I do see here quite a lot.
David?
You mentioned just now about breaking out of jail. I think what the psychological sort of catalyst for the Cambodian society, whether the people or the government, was I believe this massive UN presence that was sent in Cambodia in the early 90s.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, after a decade of economic embargo,
Yes.
we got suddenly exposed to this massive
This
foreign
big bang.
presence pouring in
Yeah.
billions of dollars
Yeah.
into the Cambodian economy, and this is what actually also lead to the dollarization of our economy since then.
Yeah.
So I guess this could be also the kind of psychological effect.
But you know, let's face it, right? I mean, in those days when we start from scratch, the Big Bang was very helpful. But if you look at 10, 20 years later, you start to see some of the dark side of the Big Bang approach also.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, in Nepal, right? I mean, how's your private sector?
Private sector is there. They, of course, if you look at the economic growth, it has been private sector driven in terms of, you look at wherever the government or the state has not been able to provide even social infrastructure like healthcare, education, the private sector has stepped in. But the difference we see in Nepal is a lot of homegrown private sector that work through associations and different modalities, which is pretty much like a cartel in the sense,
okay.
and which basically adds an additional cost to the economy. We are currently doing some work with the Open Society Foundation on this, and to see that how much does this have cost the economy. So while it is private sector is there, the private sector again, which wants to insulate itself from opening up and works very closely with the government to create this little playing field for themselves, which then taxes the consumer. And then, interestingly, because everybody is, sort of profiteering.
Yes.
So, a cabbie who profiteers buys vegetables, who is profiteering, goes to the medical center, which is profiteering, and the medical guy is using the cabbie, which is profiteering. So you create a vicious circle of profiteers.
Yes.
And while the government has, because of its capacities, it's been very limited in what it does. It has been the private sector who has been leading. But if we would have opened up, brought in global standards, brought in international players, and it would have provided an impetus for the economy to push itself further.
But Sachiv, in the WTO commitment, the country has, made commitment to open up. Why this sort of like a monopolistic still prevail?
No, I think it's nothing to do with the policies are there. Like for instance, if you want to start a company, like foreign investors are welcome.
Okay.
But then when it comes to implementation, there are many challenges.
Okay.
And the challenges don't come from the folks in the government or politics. It comes from the private sector cartels working around and blocking it. And so that becomes a challenge.
David, what's your take on that?
Well, I guess in perhaps both countries, private sector definitely play a very key role.
Yes.
In Cambodia, as you know, despite certain government regulations, over the last 2 decades, the private sector in Cambodia, however weak institutionally, still managed to thrive, economic speaking. I think especially the new breed of young entrepreneur nowadays in Cambodia that were educated overseas, then they came back, have sort of different perspective, and this new breed definitely is really the key driver that will lead the so-called development forward.
Okay, good. I think it's a good time to take a short break. When we come back, I want to look a bit from perhaps other country that you been involved, and myself also. I during my stay in Geneva, I've been working quite a bit in many different countries, and let's see how we can benchmark a bit our development pattern, right? How where do we fit in this whole global scenario? All right. Sajiv, okay, you were a globalist, if I can say. I think Cambodia, Nepal, but bear in mind in Africa, we should take an example of Africa. What come to mind is Rwanda. You know, it's interesting. When I was in Geneva, we have a friend, ambassador to Rwanda, and when I met her and I said, "Oh, where are you going?" I said, "Well, next week I'm going back home." Yes. Your post is finished? No. But why the packaging your suitcase? You know what she said? He said, "I may not come back because when I go back to the capital, the Prime Minister will do a review of my performance. If I don't meet my performance, his expectation, forget about it. I will not be coming back. There'll be another ambassador coming in." So it's quite a very tough, I would say, demand on the performance of a civil servant. What you work in Rwanda, right?
Yeah. So it's been about 5+ years we've been working in Rwanda, and definitely it's a country for all of us to learn from in terms of how they have been able to push through policy decisions, push through the thinking process, and very much like Cambodia, they have a very checkered history. They have emerged out of that, and we've seen in these 5 years, be it infrastructure development, be it sort of global players coming in, they know how to push. And I think one of the key learning out there is that one, they're modeled around Singapore. So
interesting.
Yeah. So and
why you say that?
It is basically it is state driven. But also about strict rules, regulations, and people following the rules and regulation. And they have opened up the economy, everything, like opening a business is very quick, getting licenses very quick. And whenever any project we do, the first thing they tell us is that, Sujeev, which is the best in the world? That's how they think. Unlike in Nepal, where we say, okay, how do we create the Nepali way of doing things?
Yes.
In Rwanda, it's about what's the best.
What's the best?
The Visa can do the payment method, or which sort of airline would be the best to partner. So, or which tourism chain they can get. So it's a lot to do with getting global players and global standards. And also, it is the positivity in people to say that we can do it. Let's not forget that Rwanda is also landlocked.
Yes.
And
but they switch it to land linked.
And so that is where we see this tremendous transformation. And also, having worked there, what gives me this belief is that if you look at GDP, Rwanda's GDP is half of Nepal, and the government revenue is just $2 billion compared to $6 billion of ours, and Cambodia's $4 billion. So, but with $2 billion GDP of revenue, they have been able to push, investment and growth far more than countries like Nepal with $6 billion revenues.
David, you live in Singapore for quite a while. What's your take on that?
It's very interesting. If I may sort of draw some quick comparison, right? You look at the World Bank Ease of Doing Business ranking every year, right?
Not that I agree much on with the World Bank ranking. But anyway, go.
Taking it as a kind of a general benchmark, just to have some ideas. It's interesting to notice that Rwanda, like you said, has just got Singapore government technical assistance only since 2006-2007, which is only about 10 years ago.
Yes.
So it's a very short time frame. But they have been able, because of the mindset, they may be landlocked, but they are not
Landlocked. Okay.
Because the mindset of the political leadership there, they are managed to actually increase the World Bank Ease of Doing ranking. They are now, if 2017 forecast is about 56.
Wow.
Right.
Awesome. Huh?
Last year there was something like 59.
Wow. Keep moving up.
Nepal, I look at the figures for 2017 to 2016 was around 100, and Cambodia is 128 last year.
Okay.
So you can see the tremendous sort of leapfrog that is generated from some sort of leadership that has very determined to have a vision, like he said, They just want the best of everything.
Yeah. Also, I think one thing I just want, it's also the determination of keeping small things, not big things.
Yeah.
Like it's as clean as Scandinavian countries. You can't imagine. The first impression I got when I went there is that a poor country can also be clean. Our head is that it to be clean, everything, you have to be rich.
Exactly.
But you can, and it's those little things, they have their cleaning, people following laws, even getting on a public transportation, they queue, no eating on the street, no vendors that clutter your space, no, sort of traffic rules are traffic rules, people follow it. So it's also doing these little things right, which I think in our countries we
still have
a long way to go, because we talk about big things, but also I think from Rwanda and looking at also the neighboring countries there.
How big is Rwanda?
Oh, Rwanda is, if you look at from the population wise, about 12 million. And from a size-wise, is it's 2/3 the size of Bhutan. So it's it's a very small country.
Very small, yeah.
But they have been able to do the basics right, and I think it's so important, because I think a lot of time we are spending a lot of energy in trying to fight the basics, be it the traffic, be it the garbage, be it the pollution, and that's something that is a great thing to learn.
Remind me when I went to Botswana a few years ago, and of course you have a liaison officer, so from the conference they take you to different place, university, and at one point the whole city was so clean, so organized, that I couldn't help but ask a question: can you take me to see the ghetto? Wow. And the liaison officer say, ghetto? Oh, you want to see a poor area? I said, yeah, okay. So he said, oh, okay. Because I thought in my mind he only wanted to show me the good place in Botswana. So he took me to this poor area. Of course, the buildings are old, and everything. But I can see people mopping in poor area. They're mopping. They're cleaning the street. I mean, again, it's a mindset.
Yeah.
People have to take pride. And it sort of reminds me in the village of my grandmother in the island of Costerton, right? People do take pride of cleaning, and it's dirt road, right? But they're cleaning the leaves and everything. So I think this is about it's a mindset thing, right? The state can do but so much, right?
Yeah.
People have to actually contribute to that process.
Yeah, and it's very important, and more I look at what I call as humanomy, which is how do humans interact with the economy. More and more I see it is more of culture and mindset rather than pouring in the money.
Yes.
Because the problem in Nepal is that it's not the money,
But sometimes it's policy, because in Botswana I say, but why? There's not much traffic. You don't have a lot of activity. He say no. The government set two different timing. Like for government office, they start at say 1 hour early, and then the private sector start an hour later, but then they leave an hour later also.
Yeah.
So you don't have the banker, the businessman, the government official, the worker go at the same time on the street. See? So it's a timing of the workflow. So in a way, it relieves half of the traffic jam right there. So I believe there's some policy innovation also that could help there.
Yeah, and I think it's also following the law. Like I say in Nepal, red light is only a suggestion to stop. So until unless people are not going to be scared that if you don't stop at the red light, you are going to be penalized, you are going to be fined, and countries like Rwanda have done it well. That if you mess up with the traffic, the fines are pretty hefty, and so it's doing again the basic things. And it's not that we cannot do. Like in Nepal, we have this very strong no drinking and driving laws.
Okay.
And it's been one of the most effective tools that have been implemented.
Yeah.
So it is not that state doesn't have the capacity, or it's not that the people are not going to follow rules or laws, but I think it comes to the mindset and the culture around it. You know?
But you know, I think the other dimension I thought is very helpful also, because Nepal, like Laos, you're landlocked, right?
Yeah.
Laos have always said that we want to be land-linked, right? But geography matter also. Having good neighbor or economically thriving neighbor help also, right? So your challenge in Nepal is probably you're next to the giant of India.
Yeah, we are land linked, not only land linked with India, we have a special transit and trade agreement with India. And China is opening through the Belt One Road.
Yes.
We'll be more connected to China. We already are. So,
But
in terms
geographies, the physical condition.
yeah,
will be hard, no?
we do have the terrain is an issue,
Okay.
but the good part of the population live in the southern plains
okay.
and the mid hills, which has a pretty good sort of a terrain. So we should not, we love to make excuses,
Yes,
perhaps,
okay.
be it poverty, be
Sure.
it landlocked,
Sure.
and I think it also comes to the whole mindset of development for us has been imposed from outside, because it's been a lot of development.
The poverty broker, as
Poverty
you
brokers.
written in some your publication, the poverty broker, same as Cambodia. We have a lot of poverty broker, people who thrive on making Cambodia poor, because that's how you get money.
Yeah. So we need to use new lenses to say that, look, we are connected to, 2030, these two economies are going to be close to $40 trillion, So Nepal is linked to these $40 trillion economy.
Yes.
So it's to see what can we do, rather than to say that, we are landlocked, we are poor,
Yes,
and we
yes,
are,
yeah.
so sort of have that mindset.
Yes.
So it is, again, recalibration of the thought process.
Okay. David?
Well, like you mentioned, you are in between two giants, right? And these two giants by 2050, according to World Economic Forum data, they will be China, the number one economic power, and India number two.
Number two, yeah.
So you're going to have a very good challenge to ahead in terms of managing the neighborhood. But again, back to Rwanda, it all leads to, like we are talking about, mindset. Right? I remember when the previous Singapore Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, in the early 60s, after they just got independent, he went to visit a professor in Taiwan, asking about underdeveloped country, that sort of thing, and the professor just told him one phrase, and there's no such thing like underdeveloped countries. There are only underdeveloped mindsets, and I think that triggered the determination to change the mindset in order to really thrive and leapfrog the economy. It works for Singapore. It seemed to work for Rwanda, who emulate the Singapore system. So again, back to Cambodia and Nepal, how do we possibly manage to actually trigger this mindset change within the society in general, and also within the
But
government?
I mentor quite a bit the younger generation of entrepreneur, of civil servant. I see that passion for development, right? I see that desire to catch up, right? I mean, and we are blessed also that as a post-crisis country 20-some years ago, many donors, probably one of the best thing they have done for Cambodia is to give Cambodian scholarship, right? So after 10 years, 6-7 year study abroad, these younger generation are coming back. They're bringing a certain exposure with them, and I can see that their way of thinking are very modern, very innovative. They want to be rule-based. They want to apply with the law, and every year that number keeps going up. So that's in a way is my hope a bit,
Yeah, I think I echo your the sentiments, in the sense that in Nepal it's also the same. We have lots of people going out. I think we send 10,000 students to the US every year. Same thing with UK.
10,000?
10,000. We are one of the top 15 countries, and then then to UK and to Australia. So some of them come back, and they are the ones I also have hope in. At BEAD, our company, it's sort of I would say everybody who works with us and comes for internship and fellowships are people who have had an education outside and they come back, and there are basic things they know. Like for instance, that if it is 9 o'clock, it is 9 o'clock. It's not whatever time.
Yes.
And it's so basic things they learn and come, which is as important as the degrees and the qualifications they bring back.
We're going to take a short break. When I come back, I want to stress more on this issue of human capital development in part of the development of a particular country. Okay.
Sure.
Sujeev, I'm shocked to hear that. Shocked in a positive way, that Nepal sent about 10,000 of its students to study in the U.S. In fact, it reminded me when I was a refugee in the state when I got there in 1980, right? And that's when I met a good friend, Suraj. That was the time when Dr. Mahathir sent thousands and thousands of Malaysian. In my campus, I keep bumping into Malaysian. So I think exposure to foreign education is very important, but you have to make sure they come back.
Yeah, they come back, and I think that is there. And also I think having worked in the private sector for many years, my primary background is finance, went on to do marketing. But at the end of the day, be it for corporations, be it for organizations, to bring in the change and to bring in the change in mindset, I think the interface with human capital is the key. And that's why 4 years ago, I went back to Colombia to get a certification in coaching, and I do a lot of work across leadership now. And I'm focusing a lot on the transformational leadership at all levels, at the bottom grassroots levels to at corporate CEO levels. And I think that is where the challenge is, because it's people come back with PhDs, people come back with great MBA degrees, but then your mindset has to also change.
Yes.
You have to bring in the same things like ethical practices, sense of gratitude.
Okay.
I mean, our countries are doing so well. People are much well off than they were 20 years ago, but they are not thankful. They keep on complaining. So how do you bring in the positive mindset?
Yes.
And these are some of the fundamentals I see is so much required in terms of changing the way we think, because unless this sort of transformation happens, it's going to be very difficult to push the sort of growth.
I think I'll give to David a thought later, but for me, I think I came back in 93, right? And when there was David about the same time, no? That's when we met about.
Well, I was 89.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look at the last 23 years, that I've been back here, that the country just emerged from the peace process. We come a long way, We come a long way. And that's why it's good to have this long-term perspective or retrospective, right? And my issue is that sometimes I'm dealing with people who are parachuted, from New York, Washington, Paris, or Singapore even, because if the guy never come to Cambodia, for him it's a still photo picture of Cambodia in that moment in time with all its imperfection, everything. But then if you look at it as a video as a film, you can see, yes, there's imperfection now, but oh my God, 23 years ago it's hell. David.
Yeah, sure, but maybe it's all leads to also, like I said, mindset, and especially the strengthening of the overall institutional framework in all the countries that we are debating, right? If you talk about institutional framework, probably that was the one factor that explains why Rwanda has managed to actually climb up so fast the sort of World Bank ranking. And you just mentioned every ambassador that has been posted overseas, every year they are sent back to the capital city to go through an appraisal. If they don't meet the benchmark, they don't go back to their posting. So to me, this is very sort of quite a kind of corporation of sector practice. Like you don't perform, they show you the door. And if you look at also the institutional framework and especially the educational process that is been developed in Rwanda, the vocational training sector, the vocational training national center is really something quite amazing, which was emulated from the Singapore ITE, Institute of Technology Education. You know, in Singapore ITE, if you want to be just an electrician, you have to go through a lot of tedious classes in mathematics and physics.
Wow.
That's to tell you the kind of level that is being set. And so Rwanda has kind of quite well emulated the same system. That is probably why they are now considered actually to be the Singapore of Africa. And they are now the fifth fastest growing economy in the whole African continent.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I think adding on to what David is saying is that institutional frameworks are very important. And another country we work in is Bhutan, another Himalayan kingdom. And it's very interesting. They have also brought in this performance contracts for the bureaucrats, for the ministers. And so there is that sense of accountability that you cannot, just because you've been elected, you've got this position, you just move on. And if you see the leadership there also, the current Prime Minister, Chiring Tobgay, he is being able to bring in global practices. He's a Kennedy School guy. He brings in the mindset again, which is very global, and to say that, perform or perish. And that's why they've been able to push their tourism, their hydropower growth in a phenomenal pace. And yes, it is only 800,000 people. It's easier to manage, but size-wise, it is pretty big. Compared to even say Rwanda, it's much larger than Rwanda size-wise. So managing a big country with terrain is a challenge. But so it's got to do a lot with the mindset of managing institutions. And in Nepal, that is where we have really had serious issues.
What do you see in Cambodia, David? I mean, we come a long way for sure, but how do you see we performing in terms of changing the mindset to be more competitive?
It's good that at least the private sector is already thriving, and as you said, now there's a new breed of young entrepreneur that is actually leading the charge, so to speak. But it also would require definitely a lot more interactive consultation and engagement between the thriving private sector and also now there's also a new breed of senior official in the government service. So probably that would be the next generational leaders from both public and private institutions that could get more engaged together in order to get into a new mindset.
Well, and to me, I think external factor matter quite a bit. The fact that now we are in the ASEAN Economic Community, by default we keep seeing, Cambodia and other ASEAN fellow holding hand the ASEAN way, but we are in fact competing each other for attracting foreign direct investment, a better trading partner. We're always hustling to bring job to the country, which is normal. But at the end of the day, I think to be competitive, one have to change the way we do business, and we don't have to compare all the way far to Rwanda or whatever. We always have to look next door, because the first competitor is next door. You were involved in the right sector.
Giants next door.
Well, I wouldn't say giant, but I would say we are a tiger prawn next to the river lobster. They are not Maine lobster or but it's a river lobster. They're big, but we are tiger prawn, right? We're not a shrimp, we're a tiger prawn. But still, still, and you were in the right sector. You know how competitive we have to be. If the price of the paddy are as competitive Vietnam or Thailand, but then if the price of rice export, FOB, our port, we are $50 more than our neighbor, that tell you already how uncompetitive we can be.
Right. Yeah. I think one thing with the ASEAN integration of Cambodia, where I see is that one of the challenges is going to be for Cambodia, and looking at it, is going to be that the mobility of human capital, and especially the educated lot who come with, they are going to be lured with more interesting opportunities in the region as integration takes place, because we saw that in the hospitality industry in Nepal. As we had more graduates churning out. For them, India was a better market, or Dubai is a better market, and so
it's a brain drain.
I wouldn't say brain drain, but then people move in for opportunity, because now in the global village, you go to places where you feel you got the best opportunity for a career, and it seems that when opening up happens, there is that rush at the beginning. It's like the gold rush. And so that is where I think with some of my Cambodian friends and also with David, we have been having this conversation as to, it will be to see how you manage that.
I want to, we're almost at the end of the show, but I want to touch a bit on foreign direct investment. How the paradigm have been shift, because when we think of post-crisis country, we think as a fragile state. But you mentioned in one of your publication, from fragile state to frontier state. Now with the protectionism of Donald Trump in Europe, very little yield on your investment. I think this frontier state is a very attractive thing.
I think.
David,
we discussed a few days ago, Suju pointed very rightly that bigger market like China, India, Japan, of course the FDI amount is into the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. But for frontier market, smaller market like Nepal, Rwanda, Cambodia, Laos, or even next door Vietnam, the smaller side in the $20-30 million kind of investment, it definitely there will be a lot more opportunities than that. So this is maybe where specific smaller market like us in Cambodia and Nepal should work in this particular niche.
Well, not all big things are better than small things. Let's face it.
So I think working with structuring funds and other areas of private equity, what we've seen is we are looking at $5 to $10 million parcels. So as David mentioned, if you've got $100 million, you go to China, India. But if with $5-10 million, nobody's going to look at you. So where do you go? You come to Cambodia, you go to Laos, you go to Myanmar, you go to Nepal, and within South Asia, I call it the East South Asia. So it is Nepal, Bangladesh, and parts of the Northeast India, and that's about 500 million people. So I can see Cambodian construction firms, like yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine here, and to say that can Cambodian construction firm look at that market? Can some of the hospitality firms from there come here? So we would see, as the larger multinational globalization is going to be impacted for a while on wait and watch. We would see a lot of intra-regional movement, telecom companies from Southeast Asia going into East Africa, or East Asian African company coming here. So I think I'm personally looking forward to some very interesting times in the next 2 years, where we see these funds and we see companies trying to move into regions that is like never before, and that is a big hope for all of our countries, to bring in the sort of investment, the know-how, and the capacity, and also along with that the human capacity.
Well, Sujeev, it's time to wrap up, but I want to say that it's quite a good dialogue that we had. We've been able to touch a bit on the Southeast Asia, East Asia, and fly all the way to Africa, and sort of see ourselves where we fit. And I hope the audience could learn something from our exchange. Like you say, life is all a learning journey, and the more you can learn about other country, the more you can grow. And that's basically the purpose of why I'm having this talk show. But once again, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Siphana.
And David, as always, you are my regular gap filler.
Always pleasure.
All right. Good. Well, we're coming to the end of the show, and I hope you have a glimpse of the various development pattern in different part of not of the world, but in Asia, Southeast Asia, in a bit of Africa, and but one thing that strikes me is that behind the development side of it, there's a whole thing of a human side, and in the human side, there is the so-called mindset. So if you are able to unlock your mindset, you can open up yourself to God knows what are the best experience in the world, what are the best learning in the world, and hopefully you can apply, for the betterment of your society, for the betterment of your country, and perhaps if it's only with yourself, it's already a good start. All right, so on that note, I'm glad we have that chat, so good night.